On a recent daytime segment hosted by Jeremy Vine on Jeremy Vine, a simple but explosive question was thrown out to viewers on X, the platform many still remember as Twitter. The question was blunt. Do you support the royal family? No cushioning, no soft focus, just a yes or no. The result? A staggering 84% of respondents said no. Only 16% expressed support. Now, before palace loyalists rush to dismiss it as just a social media poll, let's pause. Of course, it wasn't a nationwide referendum. Of course, it wasn't conducted with clipboards and carefully weighted demographic samples. But that's not the point. Public opinion doesn't collapse in a single dramatic explosion. It erodes quietly. It weakens beneath the surface. And then one day, a number like 84% flashes across a screen, and suddenly the tremor feels like an earthquake. This poll didn't create dissatisfaction. It revealed it. And the context matters. The shadow hanging over this moment is the ongoing fallout connected to Prince Andrew and his association with Jeffrey Epstein. Years have passed, headlines have come and gone, statements have been drafted and redrafted, yet the controversy refuses to disappear. Why? Because in the court of public opinion, many feel it was never truly resolved. Reports have indicated that multiple police forces across the United Kingdom have reviewed or assessed information connected to Andrew. In Britain, policing is regional. Each force operates independently within its jurisdiction. So when more than one force examines related concerns, that signals seriousness. This isn't just tabloid chatter. This is institutional scrutiny. And while legal processes are complex and nuanced, optics are not. To the average person watching from home, the image is unsettling. Questions linger, investigations are discussed, and yet Andrew remains within royal properties linked to King Charles III. Whether legally justified or not, perception shapes reality. And perception says this: if an ordinary citizen faced this scale of controversy, they would not be retreating behind palace gates. That's where frustration sharpens. It stops being just about one individual and becomes about the institution itself. In 2022, Andrew reached an out-of-court settlement with Virginia Giuffre in a civil lawsuit filed in New York. The reported figure was approximately $16 million. $16 million. That's not a symbolic amount. That's not a parking ticket. That's a life-changing sum of money deployed to avoid a public trial. And here's where public concern deepens. Widespread reporting suggested that then Prince Charles contributed financially to the settlement, while the late Queen Elizabeth II was reported to have covered a substantial portion of the remainder. If accurate, that means senior members of the royal family were directly involved in funding a settlement that prevented allegations from being tested in open court. For critics, that's the core issue. Instead of sworn testimony, there was a payout. Instead of cross-examination, there was a financial agreement. Defenders argue it was pragmatic, that it spared the nation a drawn-out spectacle. But that logic assumes that avoiding embarrassment outweighs establishing truth. And that's where many younger observers draw a hard line. The monarchy's authority is not political power. It is moral symbolism. It is pageantry wrapped in the promise of integrity. When financial settlements appear to substitute for transparency, that symbolism weakens. Eventually, Buckingham Palace issued statements expressing concern and indicating willingness to cooperate with authorities, if approached. If approached. In an era defined by instant communication, that phrase felt cautious, even conditional. The monarchy has historically relied on restraint. The never complain, never explain doctrine once worked in a slower media age. But today, silence is rarely interpreted as dignity. It's interpreted as evasion. And that generational shift is critical. Younger audiences grew up with podcasts, investigative documentaries, and real-time social media updates. They expect leaders to answer questions directly. They expect institutions to acknowledge harm clearly and quickly. Against that backdrop, attempts by other senior royals to distance themselves from Andrew's controversy have been noticeable. Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, have reportedly sought to separate their public roles from the scandal. William's diplomatic engagements abroad have been framed as forward-looking, focused on global leadership rather than internal turmoil. But distancing is not the same as reform. Stepping away from controversy doesn't answer why institutional mechanisms appeared to shield a senior member in the first place. It doesn't address why family funds were reportedly mobilized to avoid public courtroom scrutiny. For many observers, it looks like damage control rather than transformation. And this is where the conversation inevitably circles back to Prince Harry and Meghan, Duchess of Sussex. For years, they were portrayed as disruptive, as dramatic, as reckless. Their decision to step back from royal duties was framed by critics as betrayal. But fast forward to today. The institution is facing one of its most sustained credibility challenges in decades, and the crisis did not originate in California. It originated within palace walls. Harry spoke openly about institutional resistance to confronting internal issues. He described a culture of silence and image management. Meghan described feeling unsupported when negative narratives swirled unchecked. At the time, that honesty was labelled inappropriate. Now, it looks prescient. Harry's record of service extends far beyond ceremony. His military deployment to Afghanistan wasn't symbolic, it was real. And the creation of the Invictus Games demonstrated a commitment to wounded veterans that transcends royal ribbon-cutting. Invictus is about resilience, about dignity, about spotlighting those who served and sacrificed. Meghan entered royal life with her own career, advocacy experience and voice. Her work around women's empowerment and community engagement didn't begin with a title, and it didn't end when she stepped away from one. Together, Harry and Meghan made a choice. They relinquished certain privileges. They absorbed relentless scrutiny. They built independent projects. They told their story on their own terms. At the time, critics called it rebellion. Today, it looks like insulation. They are not entangled in settlement funding. They are not issuing cautious palace statements. They are not scrambling to separate themselves from controversy. They are operating outside the institutional structure, now under intense scrutiny. That 84% figure is not just about Andrew. It represents accumulated frustration with perceived double standards, with selective accountability, with the idea that status can buffer consequences. Critics of monarchy argue that hereditary power sits uneasily in a democratic age. And when financial settlements appear to protect insiders, that argument gains traction. Defenders will point to tourism revenue, diplomatic influence, tradition, but soft power relies on credibility. Pageantry cannot compensate for ethical ambiguity. The real question now is whether the institution can adapt. Will it prioritize transparency over image management? Will it draw a clear line between personal loyalty and institutional responsibility? Will it demonstrate that no title grants immunity from scrutiny? Because respect cannot be demanded. It must be earned and re-earned. Meanwhile, Harry and Meghan continue building initiatives focused on mental health advocacy, community partnerships, and storytelling that centres lived experience rather than inherited hierarchy. Whether you agree with every decision they've made is almost beside the point. They embraced direct communication in an era that demands it. They addressed uncomfortable realities publicly. They aligned themselves with causes that resonate with younger generations. Authenticity, however messy, often resonates more deeply than polished silence. The monarchy now stands at a crossroads. One path clings to tradition, hoping controversy fades. The other embraces reform, transparency and accountability, even when uncomfortable. That rapid poll may not determine constitutional change, but it signals sentiment. And sentiment over time shapes history. 84% is not a rounding error. It is a mood. If the institution wants to restore confidence, it must confront uncomfortable truths head-on. Shielding individuals, funding settlements, issuing reactive statements, those strategies belong to a different media era. The digital age remembers everything. Harry and Meghan's departure once seemed like a fracture. Now, to some, it appears like a strategic step away from a structure struggling to modernize. They are not defined by this crisis. They stand apart from it, and that contrast is powerful. As always here on the channel, we will continue examining these developments with clarity and courage. If you value commentary that challenges entrenched power and supports transparency, make sure you subscribe. Share this episode with someone who believes accountability matters. Drop your thoughts below, especially on that 84% figure. Is it a fleeting social media spike or a sign of deeper change? And I'll see you in the next one.